On April 9th of 2009, I attended the annual memorial of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And not only did I attend this service, but I recorded it as well. So if you want to, you can go up to the More Info box, and there's a link there, and you can download this whole presentation so you can follow along in your own Bible and come to your own conclusions in the matter. But what I wanted to do in this video series is offer my critique of this presentation to where I can play this all the way through and I can just stop the tape and express my disagreements. And this isn't meant to be an exhaustive commentary because the presentation wasn't exhaustive. And just like the speaker who couldn't address everything he wanted to address, I'm not going to be able to either. And so what I'm going to do is express my disagreements where I believe they are the most important. And thirdly, I'm going to be reading from the New American Standard Bible, and it's not going to disagree with the New World Translation in too many places, but where there are disagreements, I'll be sure to address those. And last, I'm making this video series because I want to point Jehovah's Witnesses to the truth, because I think this whole issue of separating Christians into two classes is detrimental to your salvation. And so, as a lover of truth and a follower of Christ, I have every obligation to not only show you where you are in error, but to point you to the truth. And so, that's my motive, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so I hope you'll enjoy this series and that you will approach it with an open enough mind to follow the truth wherever it may lead.
Jehovah's Witnesses and invited guests around the world are gathering just like we are this evening. A lot of effort has been put forth in preparation for this very important celebration that we're about to do this evening. But some might wonder, why is it that Jehovah's Witnesses place so much emphasis on this event? What does it mean for you personally? Let's look back to the beginning of this memorial celebration so that we can find the answer to those questions. Take your Bibles, if you would, and let's open to the book of Luke, the 22nd chapter. And as you're turning there, I'll give you a little bit of context so you can get the setting. Jesus is here with his disciples. Earlier that day, he sent them out to make preparations for the celebration of the Jewish holiday of the Passover. So now, Jesus and his 12 apostles had already celebrated the Passover. Then Judas, the unfaithful one, was sent away as he went away to betray Jesus. It was at this time that Jesus instituted a new celebration, that which we are celebrating this evening. Let's take a look there at verse 19 of Luke chapter 22. Also, he took a loaf, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This means my body, which is to be given in your behalf. Keep doing this in remembrance of me." Also the cup in the same way after they had the evening meal, he's saying, "This cup means the new covenant, by virtue of my blood, which is to be poured out in your behalf." Here Jesus mentioned a couple of emblems, a couple of items, bread and wine, much like you see here on the table, on the stage here. But Jesus said that the bread that he broke and handed to his disciples, he said, "This means my body," or represents his body, which is to be given in your behalf. He was making reference to the sacrifice of his life that he was going to make later that same day. Then down in verse 20, he mentions this cup, the cup of red wine. And he said, "It means the new covenant by virtue of my blood." which is to be poured out. So he made a connection there between the outpouring of his blood in this new covenant, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But then he said again that it was going to be poured out in behalf of his disciples. Again, making reference to the sacrifice that he was about to make in behalf of his followers. Then if you notice there in verse 19, this is a key statement. He said, "Keep doing this in remembrance of me." So, why is it that Jehovah's Witnesses place so much emphasis on celebrating this memorial of Christ's death? Well, one reason is because Jesus directly told his followers to do it. But you know, more is involved than just obedience to Jesus' instructions. Jesus said to do this in remembrance of him. But what are we to remember concerning Jesus at this time?
So far in the presentation, the speaker hasn't said much that I can really disagree with. But he asks some very good questions. First, he mentions the reason why they are commemorating Jesus' death. And the reason is because the text tells us to. There's something I want you to think about if you're watching this video, if you're a Jehovah's Witness. There's a connection between the remembering and the doing. That's right there in the text. And so, in order to remember Jesus' death, we have to do something. So, what I want you to do is read this text and answer this question. How are we to remember Jesus' death, and what are we to do to remember Jesus' death?